I was stuck for 3 days at the bottom of the ocean with no food, light, or air. For 60 hours, I fought to survive in a sunken ship, facing sharks and freezing waters. I'm Harrison Okene, and this is my story. Here's how it all went down 12 years ago. I was 29, just starting out my life with my amazing wife, Hausa. Back then, I worked as a chef. At first, I bounced around from one restaurant to another, but for the last 5 years, I'd been working on ships, mainly tugboats. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. Our ship was supposed to leave at midnight. That morning, I'd just gotten back home from another trip, totally wiped out. I crashed into bed and slept until noon. I was that tired. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the smell of daffodils. Hausa had gone all out. She'd bought orchids, daffodils, and roses and arranged them beautifully on the dinner table. She'd even made my favorite food, pizza. When I got up, still half asleep, I followed the scent and found this amazing setup. The table was decorated so perfectly it looked like something out of a magazine. I was pretty good at making pizza. It was my thing. But I swear, Hausa's pizzas were on a whole other level. The warm, savory mix of melted cheese, tomato sauce, and that perfectly baked dough with a hint of herbs and a crispy crust. It was heavenly. And the scent of it blending with the sweet freshness of daffodils in the air. It was like the universe was spoiling me. Then I saw her, Hausa, standing there in this beautiful dress with purple butterflies on it. She looked like something straight out of a dream. In that moment, I felt like I was floating, like I was a butterfly myself, completely weightless and in love. All my exhaustion vanished in an instant. I hugged her tight, kissed her collarbone, and whispered, "Thank you, my love, for everything." She looked at me with those kind, soulful eyes and smiled. Then, with a voice as soft as a lullaby, she whispered, "I love you, Harrison. Never forget that." "Love you more than the stars, babe," I whispered back, taking in the scent of her hair. It felt like I'd stepped right into heaven. We sat down, enjoyed the incredible lunch she'd made, and then decided to head out for a walk in the park nearby. I remember her holding my hand as we walked, casually sipping from her water bottle, and then she turned to me. "Harrison, have you ever thought about leaving your job on the ship?" she asked gently. They don't even pay you that well. Things were so much better when you worked in restaurants. I just feel so stressed every time you leave on one of those trips, baby. It'd be so much better if you could find something else, you know?" She said it with such kindness, her voice calm and loving, but I could hear the worry behind her words. Back then, we were in a pretty tough financial spot. I didn't make much money, and Hausa, she was a nurse. She always understood what I was going through and never complained. She was so kind and supportive. Honestly, she had every right to ask me to change my job. I made more money when I worked in restaurants. But I told her, "Please, just be patient, my love." I talked to our manager recently. I told him my salary isn't enough and I can't cover all our expenses. He promised he'd increase it next month. You know I love the ocean and the sea, Hausa. That's why I've stayed in this job. I said it with a smile, trying to make her feel better. But looking back, I wish I wasn't so in love with the ocean. I wish I had quit that job that day. I wish I'd turned off my phone and ignored my manager's call that night. I never could have imagined what I was about to go through, how everything, our beautiful lunch, all the love, all those moments, would turn into a nightmare in just a few hours. Hausa didn't say anything after that. She just went silent. She was pregnant with our baby, though we didn't know if it was a boy or a girl yet. She said, "You know, we're going to have more expenses once the baby's born, Harrison. I won't be able to work in my last month of pregnancy because I need to rest. We're going to need more money to make ends meet, baby." She had a lot of trouble with the pregnancy, and after so many medical treatments, we were finally able to have our baby. Her doctor had warned her to take it easy. She couldn't work too much because there was a high risk of losing the baby. I knew that, and I knew how important it was for her to rest. I was super stressed. I kept thinking about getting another job, but I couldn't. My trips on the ocean were so long, and when I came back, I was completely drained. It felt like I had two choices: quit my job or stay and ask for a raise. I chose the second option, but honestly, I didn't know how much my manager would pay me. He was so cheap and tight-fisted. His salary for the whole crew was way too low, and all my colleagues were unhappy about it. We went out to the street and bought some salmon for dinner. Hausa told me she wanted me to make sushi for her. She was pregnant, so she was always craving something different. One minute it was chocolate, the next it was ice cream, and then something else. It was just the pregnancy cravings taking over. We got home around 6 p.m., and Hausa asked me to make dinner. So I started making the sushi while she was watching TV. I had my favorite song playing in the background as I cooked, feeling super happy. I had no idea that just a few hours later, I'd be starving for 3 days. The song playing was Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen. Hey, I just met you. And this is crazy. But here's my number. So call me maybe. I was singing and dancing to it in the kitchen, and Hausa was filming me with her phone. We were both crazy and happy. Honestly, whenever I watch those videos now, I wish I had never gone to work that night and that the accident had never happened to me. It was around 8 when we had dinner, we washed the dishes together, and then I took a quick nap. After that, we watched The Avengers on TV. We were both lying on the sofa in each other's arms, just enjoying the moment. Around 10:30 p.m., my phone rang. It was Jack. He said, "Hey Harrison, you haven't shown up at the port yet, right? I can't find you. You're always here before we depart. Did something happen to you, man?" Jack was originally from Africa. His real name was Emeka, but we all called him Jack. I was just so comfortable, lost in the peace with Hausa. I didn't want to leave the house. It felt like something was keeping me glued to the sofa, not letting me get up, put on my uniform, and go to work. My gut was telling me something wasn't right. I finally picked up and answered Jack. "Ah man, haha. I don't know why I've become so lazy. I really wish we didn't have a trip tonight. Aren't you tired, Jack?" Jack laughed out loud and said, "Do you think they're going to cancel the trip because of us, you and me? You're just a chef and I'm a ship's servant. Don't be lazy, man. I haven't slept all day either, but we still have to go. You know how it is." He was right, but I still regret it. I wish I hadn't gone to work that hellish night. I should have stayed home and gotten fired from the shipping company instead. Hausa had fallen asleep, so I gently hugged her and carried her to our bed. I covered her with a warm blanket, turned off the light, kissed her shoulder, and didn't say a word so I wouldn't wake her up. I put on my uniform and sprayed on my favorite Dior Sauvage perfume, which was also Hausa's favorite. I turned off the TV, left the house, and as I got into the car, I noticed that the window in the house was slightly open. I thought about going back to close it. When I got back, I took one last look at Hausa. I had this feeling like I was going to miss her while I'd be out on the ocean for days. I looked at her one more time, wrote a little note on the fridge. "Love you to the moon and back, my angel. Take care of yourself and our baby." I drove to the port, parked the car, and got out. It was around 11:30 and the ship was set to depart at midnight. Our ship, a tug named Jascon 4, was owned by Chevron and usually sailed through the Atlantic waters along the coast of Nigeria. That night, we were pulling a vessel full of oil tanks. It was super routine by now, something I'd been doing for over 4 years. When we boarded the ship, I searched for Jack and finally found him. The ship departed with its blaring horn, and we were sitting together in Jack's room. We all had our own rooms on the ship and locked them up because there were a lot of pirates on the Atlantic waters. "Hello, lazy man," Jack called me, cracking open a soda and offering me another one. I grabbed it but didn't open it. He drank his soda, looked straight into my eyes and said, "Looks like you're jobless till breakfast, man. Please make something delicious for lunch." He laughed out loud. He was a bit drunk but still aware. I didn't answer him. He sat down next to me and asked, "Why aren't you talking, Harrison?" "I'm sick and tired of working hard and only getting half the salary I deserve, Jack. My wife is pregnant, you know that. We can't live on this salary anymore," I said. Jack replied, "I'm tired too. What if we go to the boss's office and tell him to increase our salary?" "I've already gone to him. He said he'd increase it next month, but I don't believe that's enough," I answered. I couldn't hold back my tears. I left his room, looking at Jack one last time. His eyes were filled with tears too. He was 25, had a young girlfriend, but couldn't marry her because of his financial situation. He was in the same boat as me. I went to my room, locked the door and fell asleep. Around 4 a.m. I woke up. I looked out at the ocean. It was dark, with only the moonlight reflecting off the water. It was windy, but it wasn't anything unusual. Still, I felt a little afraid, but didn't care. That's the ocean for you. I went to Jack's room, but his door was locked and I couldn't get in. I was soaking wet from the heat inside the ship. I went to the bathroom to take a shower, still unaware of the disaster that was about to happen. I turned on the faucet, took my clothes off and jumped into the shower, but then, suddenly, the bathroom started to flood. I slipped and fell to the floor as the ceiling began to collapse. Everything from the shelves and the toilet came crashing down on me. I was stunned and didn't understand what was happening until I heard the screams of the other crew members. That's when I realized the ship was sinking. A massive wave had formed because of bad weather and high winds. It crashed into the ship, snapping the cable at exactly 4:30 a.m., just as I was in the bathroom. The tugboat flipped over, its entire deck submerged underwater, and the ship's hull stuck out above the surface. The crew of 12 people, my colleagues, were trapped. Since we always locked our rooms because of pirates in the Atlantic waters, none of them could escape. I struggled to stand, using the walls to steady myself, and slowly made my way out of the cabin. The rising water had already gone over my head. I took a deep breath, driven purely by fear, and managed to find my way to the engineering room, a small space that had an air pocket. Earlier, I had desperately tried multiple times to open Jack's room, but the door was locked tight and wouldn't budge. I left the door in frustration, tears welling up. The engineering room wasn't completely submerged. The water hadn't filled the space entirely, and the remaining air made it the safest place for me at that moment. I had no food or fresh water, just the cold, damp surroundings. The floor was partly flooded and the chill quickly numbed my feet. My chances of survival seemed slim. While searching, I stumbled across a soda bottle and a life jacket with 2 attached flashlights. At this point, the ship had already sunk to the ocean floor, lying at a depth of 100 feet. The ship had sunk as deep as a 10-story building, and the immense pressure of the water made the hull creak and groan. Outside the door, I could hear faint sounds. Sharks and other sea creatures were circling the wreckage. Hope began to fade as I kept praying, pouring my heart out to God. My wife was always on my mind. I replayed our happiest moments together, the last dinner we had, the way she smiled in our room, and the excitement about our baby on the way. Anger swelled inside me, and I slammed my head in frustration, questioning why I had boarded this ship that night. Why didn't I stay home? Why didn't I listen to my instincts? I thought bitterly. Not having food or water wasn't my biggest worry. It was the lack of oxygen. On average, a person needs about 350 cubic feet of air a day, and my small air pocket wasn't going to last. Breathing was getting harder with each passing hour, and the cold was creeping into my bones. Somehow, I managed to hold on for almost 60 hours. This was partly because the immense pressure around the ship had compressed the air to about 4 times its normal density. Another issue was the buildup of carbon dioxide. Each time I exhaled, I added more of this toxic gas to the air, and once it reached 5%, it could kill me. The air was slowly becoming unbreathable, and every breath felt heavier than the last. Still, I clung to life in that freezing, suffocating room. Fortunately, I got a bit of luck. The water around me absorbed some of the carbon dioxide. As I moved and splashed, I increased the surface area of the water, which helped keep the CO2 from reaching dangerous levels. But the challenges didn't stop. Hypothermia was becoming a real danger in the cold, dark space. When the body temperature drops below 95 DFF, confusion sets in, memory fades, and your sense of reality distorts. Some people even show something called terminal burrowing, where they start clawing at the ground or walls, trying to find shelter even in tight, enclosed spaces. My small room had icy water pooling at the bottom. If I had stayed on the floor for too long, I wouldn't have made it. Fortunately, I managed to make a small platform out of a mattress to keep me above the waterline. As the hours dragged on, fear and despair crept into my mind, and the soda bottle I had for hydration was almost empty. To top it off, my flashlight died, leaving me in total darkness. Even though things seemed hopeless, there was a glimmer of hope. I spotted faint beams of light coming through a gap in the wreckage. Divers were searching the seabed, and I realized this might be my one shot at escaping. I gathered all my strength, left the air pocket, and swam toward the light. But just before I could reach the diver, their flashlight disappeared. Blinded by the darkness, I groped desperately, hoping to find them, but they were too far away. My oxygen was running out fast, and I had no choice but to head back to the air pocket. Gasping for air and nearly choking, I barely made it back. The key to surviving was not losing hope, even when everything seemed impossible. After catching my breath, I tried again. This time, I spotted a diver in the distance. I swam toward them as fast as I could, using all my energy. At first, the diver didn't notice me, so I knocked on my neck to get their attention and reached out to grab their hand. The diver froze for a moment, but quickly realized I was alive. I held on tight as the rescuer guided me back to the air pocket. Even though my lungs were burning for air, the rescue team immediately gave me an oxygen mask. They couldn't believe anyone had survived in those conditions for so long. I couldn't go straight to the surface because of the pressure. After being 100 feet down for nearly 60 hours, I had to gradually adjust to avoid serious health issues. The divers placed me in a decompression chamber to stabilize me safely. When I finally came out, I looked up and saw the stars. That was the moment I made it back to the surface after days of unimaginable struggle. I had thought I'd only been underwater for a day, so I was shocked to learn it had been 60 hours. Unfortunately, I also understood that my crewmates didn't survive, including my closest friend Jack. The loss hit me hard. While I was recovering in the hospital, my wife gave me the heartbreaking news. Our baby didn't make it because of the stress and grief she went through. We had tried so hard to have a child, spending so much time and money on doctors, only to lose this precious hope. In the years that followed, we couldn't have another child, but we did adopt an amazing girl who brought so much joy back into our lives. Today, she's 16 years old. I never went back to working on a ship after that tragedy. Instead, I started fresh as a chef at a popular restaurant, making a better living and rebuilding my life. But the memories still haunt me. I often wake up in the middle of the night feeling like the bed is sinking. Now, I share my story to help others understand what I went through. I'm here to answer any questions you might have about those terrifying moments deep under the ocean. Feel free to ask me anything about my experience.